Welcome to the Give Back Lab. I'm your host, Daniella Grande. You've entered a space where bold voices, real stories, and unfiltered conversations come to life. Here in the lab, we're breaking bias, shifting thinking, and exploring the power of giving back through truth, vulnerability, and diverse perspectives. We celebrate diversity of thought and everything beautiful that makes us human. This isn't just talk, it's real, it's raw, and it's exactly the kind of space we need. We're unlearning, relearning, and evolving together. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and thank you today for joining us at the Give Back Lab. I am joined today by Nate Payne, who is the creator of Living Systems Leadership. I'm very excited to have this conversation and dive into what that exactly means and your journey and how you got here, the thinking behind it. I find it extremely interesting and very fundamental, but so powerful. So I'm excited to have this conversation. Thank you, Nate Payne, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So let's get into it. Give me a little bit about your history and how you got to being this creator and this living systems leadership. Where did this concept come, right? Well, who are you? Where did this concept come from? And let's talk about it. I'd love to dive in.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Not what I set out to do for sure. It started with a question: why do we call it leadership? And it was just random. Like you're getting ready for work in the morning, and thoughts are just popping in and out of your head. The question was, well, okay, you have a leader, and then people are following them, but that wasn't really my experience. My experience was that people responded, right, to their environments. And I talk about this in another talk. Adults aren't really like children, right? So my grandkids, I say, oh, come over here. We're going here. They don't even care where we're going. They're just following. But adults don't really do that, right? We're responding to certain incentives, um, constraints, risk, meaning, purpose, right? We need something a little bit more. So you can be a great leader. Personally, you can have all of the qualities and yet somehow still not deliver the outcome. So I was very curious about why are we calling it leadership when it's not really someone out front and a group of people just following behind. And I didn't think any more about it. It'll go away like every other little random thought. And it didn't. And it really bothered me. So I started reading, studying different leadership books, um, whatever the latest and greatest was at the time. And over time, I started noticing a pattern. And the pattern was like this: leadership is about you. It's the way I describe it now. Leadership is like a mirror, right? So when you read those books, it's reflecting back who you are. And I thought, wow, that's interesting. But it doesn't talk about the system that you're working in at all. And so there's two sides to that. One, if you go through a number of these leadership books, it's impossible to be what they're asking you to be all at the same time. There's literally like maybe 150. If you just go back 30 years and you take the top best-selling leadership books, there's probably about 150 qualities that you need to have to be considered a great leader.
Right.
It's not an exaggeration.
Right.
I said, well, this is impossible. Well, that's sort of parallel with what I would hear around. I feel like an imposter.
Mm.
I can't quite keep up. It's very overwhelming to me. And I was one of those people. I felt the same way. And then it started to make sense. I said, well, yeah, because you gave me a target I can never hit.
Right.
Right. And if I can, on my best day, it's just on that particular day.
Right.
I can't do it consistently. And it still doesn't guarantee that you're going to get the outcomes that you want. So this was the beginning of looking for an alternative conceptualization of leadership, something a little bit different than what we had been given. I call it living systems leadership, but for many years it didn't have a name. And it was something I just worked on myself. It was my personal journey of discovery.
Right.
But I began to sort of codify it into something that I could teach and share with other people. And so that's what I've been doing for the past almost 2 years now.
Ah, that's awesome. I love how it was just a random thought
Hmm.
that you gave life, right? That
Yes.
you gave life to. And I think that that is an important point right there because we go through life and we have these random ideas. And as you say, usually they pass. Um,
Hmm.
but I love that it didn't for you because you have found your calling, so to say, right?
Yes.
In this space. So and you're absolutely right, and I'm sure there is no exaggeration, um, what leadership qualities, what qualities does it take to make a great leader? Also
Hmm.
has to do with the environment that you're in and the environment of people you're dealing with, and the times, right? What's happening in
Right.
the world, so it's all very environmental, and I love that your space is living systems leadership. So let's dive into that a little bit and talk about that. Um,
Okay. So it's really based on one truth. Okay. Anything that we create um, is not exempt, right, from the principles, the laws, the rules of the system in which it was created.
mm,
That's what it's all based upon. So whether it's a leadership model, whether it's a new technology, who cares?
right,
Everything we create is subject to those higher laws. So
right.
that's the foundational principle. So then I began to look, and it all started. I should tell the story
Yeah.
because the whole thing is almost as if um, someone or something was handing me this direction. One night, my wife and I are watching television, and we're flipping through, 1,000 different stations, and we see this thing that says the Serengeti rules, and we go, "Oh, that's great, right? It's going to be about safari in Africa, and you're going to see the big five. Fantastic. Let's watch that." We start watching it, and it has zero to do really with
Mm,
safari.
hmm.
It it talked about an ecologist named Robert Payne, different spelling of his last name, who in the 1960s he did this groundbreaking research uh, around tide pools, and he was just trying to figure out how ecosystems work. And so one day he's in Washington State, he's walking along the shore, he sees a tide pool, and he realizes, oh, I have an ecosystem, right, self-contained, just in this little spot. And it all started when he took a starfish out of that tide pool and he threw it back into the ocean.
Uh,
And he came back day after day after day to see what impact that had on that ecosystem. And so he started doing these experiments, taking out certain of the species and seeing how that impacted them. And this is what led to this idea of a keystone species.
mm,
And what he's saying is, and I think I can't remember the author, but they talk about this. They call it leverage points, right?
mhm,
But it's these small things that have an outsized impact on the environment. Now, in this case, he was talking about animals, but or plants, but it's also organizational, right? And so you want to identify what those keystones are. And so the whole documentary talked about how it started with this paper and the keystones, and how do we identify those, and perhaps we can preserve environments by identifying what the keystones are in those environments. Works great in a tide pool because you can just take a starfish and toss it.
right.
Little bit harder to do it in the middle of a forest because I can't cut down all the trees. I can't I can't get rid of all the animals to sort of figure it out. So this was part of the work. Okay, and it they started his grad students is that are actually the ones who kind of furthered this. this work, and they were looking for mathematical equations.
Mm,
So they would map out the interactions between the different animals, plants, species in that ecosystem, and they would give them like a measure or a weight.
mm,
And so they were trying to write equations to figure out how certain changes in that environment would ripple through using math, which I absolutely mirror in one of the pieces of software that we're developing in terms of planning and resource allocation. Came straight directly from uh, ecology.
wow.
So we're watching this documentary, and he's going from rivers, uh, and he's going to the Serengeti. He did eventually get there, and he's talking with all these different ecologists and experts, and you start seeing a pattern between the ecosystems. Now, my wife got bored when she realized this is not about safari. Okay. But I stayed, I hung in there because I saw something. I said, my gosh, these are organizations. What- We could be talking about any company in the world at this point in terms of these interactions.
Right.
And so it ends. I run back to the office and I just start jotting down these notes. And from that point on, I want to learn everything I can about systems thinking, about ecology, biology, how the human body works. What are the underlying principles that work across all of these particular domains? Because we can use that same intelligence, that logic in how we build our organizations. And that was the launching point. Really, was that documentary, and I highly recommend that if you get a chance, if you're into that kind of thing, to check it out.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I how how long between the spark of the idea that you had about leadership and this documentary? So how long was this concept brewing within you, within your being before you saw this documentary? What
Yeah.
was that like?
So what's funny, I tell people, I said, all I was trying to do is build a spreadsheet. So here's how it literally started. And I'm going to share this. It's a little embarrassing, but I'll share it. So I worked in IT 30 years. The biggest challenge that you have as an IT leader is how do you bridge the gap between the business stakeholders who
Absolutely.
typically don't have right a deep understanding of technology and the IT, which many times we don't have a deep knowledge of the business.
Right.
So it all started. I literally have one of these huge stickies that you put on the wall.
Mm,
And one day I just sat there and I wrote, I said, okay, we have at the very top was the business, right? Their goals, their initiatives, what they care about, their priorities. And then at the bottom of the sticky was IT, all of the different domains within IT. And in the middle, I just drew a big square. And in the square, it says translator, because I didn't know. It was like the X factor. How do you have this conversation? Now, in the leadership books, you need to be charismatic. You need to be persuasive. You need to be a good storyteller. Right?
mm,
You need to go to school and learn speak in the language of business. Which, if I really wanted to do, I probably wouldn't be in IT. Right?
right,
I would
right.
be somewhere else. But okay. So you're being told to do all these things. Most of the people I've worked with who are in IT are introverts.
Mm,
So when you ask me to be a great storyteller and charismatic and get up in front of the board and present my budget and how we're going to do all these wonderful things and how it connects, it's not going to happen.
right,
So that's the problem I wanted to solve. How do we get two people, right? It's like these two people want to order a pizza, but we don't speak the same language. How,
right.
how do we have something in the middle that translates? And so I was trying to do it. I didn't know how I was going to do it. And then one day it hit me. I said, I'm going to do it through math, right? The language of nature.
Mm, mhm.
So I started to build a spreadsheet. And I said, we're going to quantify everything. So when you ask the questions, what is the business doing? Give me a score. How important on a scale of 1 to 5 is this to accomplishing this goal?
Right.
And I just use the law of correspondence, right? As above, so below. Great. Well, everything that I'm doing to support this, those dependencies, they must also in some way inherit, right, that significance,
Right.
right? And it's a start for us to sort of justify what our recommendations are. So this is where it started. Couldn't build a spreadsheet, couldn't figure out the logic. Now,
Mm.
here's the embarrassing part. Well, one of them, I was actually at one point certified an expert in Excel, and I couldn't figure out the formula. Right. So I put it on the shelf for a couple of months. I just like, this is too hard. I can't get the logic, right, to write the formula. So one day I'm out on a walk, have my earbuds in, I'm listening to Yanni, okay,
Mhm.
like Whispers in the Dark or something. It's like the only Yanni song I like, but it comes on right on my feed. And I go, oh, I want to hear this song. So instead of going directly home, I said, I'll take one more lap around the block and then I'll go home. I get about 6 feet, 10 feet,
Mm.
and all of a sudden, I instantly knew how to do it.
Hmm.
So I, completely. And what's interesting about it was, usually we take steps towards learning something, right? I take this step, I get this piece, and you go, aha, I'm there. This was not that. This was you instantly know how to do the whole thing. So I turn around, I run back home, I run back to the office, and I just start jotting down everything before I forget it. That was the beginning. Okay. I didn't realize at that time what I was building, what I was trying to accomplish was exactly what that documentary that I would see a year later is exactly what it was.
Mm.
So when that documentary came, I said, "Oh my gosh, this is what I'm trying to build." They use different language, but the dependencies they call them interactions, and they said they called it the connection interaction strength, right? And so that was one of the variables, right? I called mine dependency.
Right.
And I was measuring it and they were measuring it. And we were trying to figure out the same thing. And they just fit like a hand in a glove. And then I was off to the races. That was about 9 years ago.
Wow. Wow. That's really I love because so I'm a huge believer in manifestation, and faith and self-belief, right?
Hmm.
Like trusting in
Yes.
yourself, and having real self-belief, and it doesn't matter if anyone else sees it. If you
Hmm.
know it and you feel it, you should absolutely go for it.
Yes.
Um, so I love that you had this idea and you tried to execute with the tools and the knowledge you had at the time, and that you put it on hold. You didn't really give up. You just
Hmm.
kind of set it aside and said, let me go, let me take a break, because sometimes we need to take a
Yes.
break, right? And
Yes.
have a fresh mind. And then you've manifested this, right? It
Hmm.
is you saw it, you knew it, you had to create that bridge that ironically you played in your career, right? Of speaking as an IT leader, kind of deciphering that the business to technology piece
Hmm.
and trying to solve for that. And so now you had to become the bridge for yourself to be able to connect. I know that that land exists over there. I have to go
Yes.
explore it. I don't know how I'm going to get there yet, but I'm going to get there. I love
Yes.
that. And I love how you can reflect back and realize that the different points in time that this came to, and that you embraced it,
Hmm.
and you ran with it, and it shows an inner passion. And I always believe when us as humans have anything that is an inner passion, we should always embrace it, right? Even
Yes.
if other people look at you and say, what are you talking about? That makes no sense.
Yes.
Um, so I love that you embrace that. And I really, it resonates with me. It really does, this living system. So when we spoke earlier, before the podcast, we talked about You gave an example of, how you take a plant that I'm in New York, right?
Mhm.
How you take a plant from New York and then you plant it in your backyard. Um, it doesn't necessarily survive or flourish the same. So let's
Yes.
talk about that concept, right? Let's tie the two together when in your teachings and getting people, because I think it is a really neutral way of getting people to let their guard down
Mhm.
about what maybe some of their insecurities are or whatever that is, and be able to take the thinking and shift it to something as beautiful as nature, as something just it is what it is kind of being, right?
Right. Yes.
I think it's easier to accept your insecurities if you look at it in that light and be more open and open yourself up. So I'd love for you to explain about that a little bit because I think the
Sure.
audience would really benefit from hearing about how by just changing the lens a little bit and looking at it from a
Mhm.
different angle, right? You watched that documentary with the thought that you had in your mind about leadership and how it applies, and you found the comparisons, and you
Mhm.
found that bridge, and you created that bridge, and sometimes it's when we're trying to fix things or work through a problem or solve whatever, sometimes if you compare it to something, I love how you can compare it to something that's completely
Yes.
different, right?
Yes.
And find the parallels and the comparables and just look at it through a different lens may make us be more at ease with dealing with things.
I agree 100%. It, following the passion, initially, again, I was just trying to solve one problem with a spreadsheet. Um, as I began to go down this path, I realized I had one wing of the airplane, and the, I had no clue what I'm doing today. If you would have told me 5 years ago this is what you're doing, I would have laughed. But the other wing is what you described. You call it lens, which is a word I use a lot. Uh, Worldview, mindset, and that's the other wing. Right.
Yeah.
So we approach it from a mindset. We look to nature and living systems to help us with that, and then we also have to get practical. Right down in the dirt, we have to do the work, and that's the framework, the software that allows you to do that. And that's what we say gives you the lift, right? And then it's your passion, right? Your purpose, your mission, that's the fuel, and now your career can
Right.
take off. So that's sort of the picture that we paint around that. But again, the foundation says that we are subject to the laws of the system in which we're creating things.
Mm,
That takes a certain amount of humility. So I am not going to be the superstar, right? I'm not going to be the leader who's on the stage under the spotlight. I'm not the hero with the cape who swoops into the department or to the organization who's dysfunctional, solve the problem, stay a few years, and fly off. That's kind of how we have painted the picture. And in the TEDx talk, I kind of talked about this. We haven't quite made the shift, right? So we're still living on a leadership model that comes from assembly lines, factories, from a different age, right? The industrial age. And we're in this new age, and we've been here for quite a while, but we still kept a lot of the old stuff. And
right.
that's part of what you hear. There's a lot of people out here speaking about it in different ways. Um, I choose living systems. So it has to start with humility because I'm probably not going to get the credit. Okay.
Right.
I'm no longer indispensable. And I have to be okay with that. I have to realize that actually working myself to a place where I am dispensable is the point of great leadership. This is the mindset part that has to shift,
Right.
right? Not just from us as leaders, but also organizations who are bringing leaders in, Right? So it's great. Go get the superstar hero leader who's done it a million times, and I can tell you 1,000 stories about companies who have done that, J.C. Penney's, so on
Yeah.
and so forth. But who thought we're going to go get this proven entity and bring them in, and they're going to do here what they did here,
Right.
and it doesn't necessarily work that way. It actually makes the organization weak
Right.
when your success all depends upon this really charismatic, uh, intelligent um, leader that everyone sort of
Right.
clings to, right? So, from an organizational standpoint, to me, this model doesn't make sense. But also from a personal standpoint, as a leader, I think the things that we should look at is what happened when you walked away, when you retired, when you took another position, maybe within the same company, different department. What happened to your team?
Right.
Did everything keep going? Did it get better? Right. So we're kind of taught to feel bad if they were able to, oh gosh, look over there. They're still being successful without me. I feel bad. And we're saying, no,
That's
the
the way.
model, the new model says that is what we're striving for. That's what great leadership is about. Because when I go into a forest, I see the entire canopy. If one of those trees falls, guess what? That forest stands.
Right.
Right. So it's a principle that nature is teaching us, right? That we can follow. And I can use forests, and actually I'm writing a book. I don't know if I told you that. I've been
Yeah.
writing this book for 2 years, and I can't. Anyway,
Right.
I'm
Come
not
on.
the
Let's
greatest
get it
writer in the
going.
world. So
Uh-huh.
yeah, this is like version 6. And then I'm a little bit OCD, so it has to be perfect. But I promise at some point, and it will explain all of these things that we're talking about. We visit all the different ecosystems. We look at those principles that are alike. Again, this is not new. I'm not doing anything that's not already there,
Right.
right? All of these principles, they existed way before Nate Payne was on this earth. I'm just pointing to them and saying, hey guys, look.
Right. But I love that concept because it's something that's existed forever, right? And will continue to exist. And
Hmm.
I agree with you. The best leaders are the ones that can walk out the door and their team continues to stand and flourish
Yep.
and grow. Because as a leader, it is my belief that your job is to enable
Hmm.
the success of everyone in the team in their roles so that they can enable the success of the business and growth,
Yes.
right? And if you do that properly, and if you nurture the people that you have reporting to you and you get them in that same mindset, they are then delivering that to their teams, so it
Hmm.
becomes a self-sustaining organization.
Yes.
And that to me is true leadership, right?
Yes.
Not this, come in with a playbook and what does the playbook mean? And, and I will tell you, Nate, that is one of the thorns in my side. I worked in management consulting before, and I worked at large organizations. And to me, the playbook's lazy. The playbook is a bunch of ideas that people put into play, right?
Hmm.
But I think that it actually can hurt your business
Yeah.
because it puts up these false guardrails. It gives you that trust the process, work
Hmm.
through the pain, trust the process. Well, why are we trusting the process? This process may not work for this ecosystem that we're in,
Correct.
right? Bill Belichick doesn't go and do plays for the Steelers, right? It's
Yes.
he runs his plays on the team that he has at hand, right? And
Yes.
as players get injured in sports, as players get injured, other players get put in, you may have to alter the play a little bit, right? If you just go by this playbook concept, oh, they have a playbook. So I just on LinkedIn recently, just a couple of days ago, I shared with some of my thoughts about somebody in my network wrote a really great piece on the fall of Starbucks because they
Mm-hmm.
hired a McKinsey CEO, right? So you hired somebody who had great pedigree, who had great resume, who had great strategic experience, but no actually implementation, growth drive, operational implementation, right?
Yes.
And it's it has cost the company millions and millions, right? So it's about it's about shifting that narrative around what is it that a true leader is. And a
Hmm.
true leader is someone, to me, who can come in and meet everyone in the organization, including the organization where they're at, and
Yes.
then grow from there, right? So to
Yes.
your living systems, add a little soil, add some nutrients, maybe add a light or
Hmm.
change, maybe some shade, whatever it is.
Yes.
You need to adapt to that, and as seasons change and weather changes and climate changes, business changes, all of those things will require us to adapt ourselves. And I think that these leaders that come in with these playbooks and these strategic mindsets of theory, and well, if this then that,
Right.
um, very rigid in their thinking, isn't something that's really malleable to success, right?
Right.
Because you have to it is a give and a take, and what works here and doesn't work there. You may do something at one organization that you absolutely cannot do at another. Um,
Yes.
so I love your concept of living systems. I really do, because it sounds so off the wall. What do flowers and plants and ecosystems have to do with
Yes.
leadership?
Yes.
But it is true, and I'm sure that in your book, and I'm looking forward to you finishing it so I can read it. Maybe I get a little sneak peek.
Of
Uh,
course.
but yeah, I look forward to seeing how you make the correlations there, because it is not something that I have ever thought of before you and I started having a
Hmm.
conversation about how um, similar they are.
Yes.
And it's a beautiful concept of, this is something that happens naturally,
Yes.
right?
It
And
wants to happen. And
yeah,
and that's but again, you don't get credit, right? So they tell you to make things happen, and that's kind of the old way.
right,
And so we say, well, I don't make it happen. What I do is I create the conditions
right,
that allow it to happen because it wants to happen.
right,
This is probably not the greatest example, but this is one I use. I think you get it. If you think about mildew, right? So I don't have to create mildew, right? All I have to do is just make sure there's no air circulating, that it's warm and it's damp.
right,
Now I didn't make mildew,
right,
but I
right,
created the conditions to
right,
allow it to emerge, which is one of the principles, and we see it in nature all the time. And there's plenty of stories in organizations of the very same thing happen. Just set it up, and it will take care of itself. The problem is I don't get credit for that.
right,
So
right,
there's a piece that I wrote called the ladder and the landscape, and this is a battle when you read these leadership books, and we just pretend like, oh, we don't see any conflict. There's no contradiction whatsoever. No, nothing going on here, folks. Keep walking. But there's
right.
a contradiction, right? Because you say, well, lean in. Make sure that they understand what you got done. Speak up, right?
Mm,
If this is all about you climbing a ladder for your career and getting credit so they understand your contribution, not arguing that, great.
right,
But it's hard to have that mindset and to reconcile that mindset with what you tell me over here, which is to be a servant leader, emotionally intelligent, and all of these other things.
right,
It's hard to do both of those. And then, if you could, what happens when those things come to a crossroads? Which one do you choose? When doing what's best for the organization and your team conflicts with you climbing the ladder.
right,
And we never talk about it. We pretend that it's not an issue, and
right,
it's a huge issue. One of the things that's interesting, again, from this is that none of this is new, right? So if you go back in ancient history and you look at any of the like brilliant people, the polymaths as they call them, they weren't trying to be experts in a particular field by accumulating more knowledge about it. If you read what they wrote, they will tell you what they were looking for is the common thread across disciplines.
right,
Very important. That's why the principles matter. That's why understanding the principles of systems and living systems in particular is because they go across all boundaries. They transcend everything that we do, not just in business and leadership, but in our families, our personal lives, everything that we do. They're
Right.
always there. We
Right.
don't have to acknowledge them. We have free will, we have agency, we can ignore them. We can go our own way, but we do so, right, at our own risk and peril. So, what we're saying is that there's a common thread. When you go into an organization, there are a set of principles. Here's the challenge, and it has been. This has primarily stayed within the domain of academia.
Mm.
There are, I can't even count. Okay. And I don't think I'm exaggerating, but I want to say tens of thousands of papers on systems thinking. Free
Mm.
to download. It's really cool. And it was part of my research. And I would read those papers and they're, very academic. Right. And
Right.
I'm reading like 4 or 5 times, like, what does this mean? And I have my thesaurus in one, well, when we had, and the paper in the other. And it's like, okay, just to get one smidgen of the idea. And then they're arguing amongst themselves, right? But on an academic level. And then at the end of it, everyone's saying, all the academics are saying, I don't know why, the business and corporate, why they don't look at systems design and systems thinking and implement it in their organizations. I think I know why they don't, because you're still fighting amongst yourselves about whose idea is the best. And
Right.
there's no practicality to it. It's all theory. So
Right.
one of the main things I wanted to do is make the leap from it being an academic endeavor and, oh, this is so cool to talk about. And they say, oh, what a great metaphor. It's deeper than that, right? We need to move past metaphor and into implementation. And so I can tell you what, and I can tell you how, and that's helpful. But if I can help you understand why, now
Yeah.
you have understanding, you have discernment, you have wisdom. And guess
Yeah.
what? You don't need me anymore.
Right. I
Now
love why.
you can go on your way. So
That's right.
that's what we're trying to do, is to empower people so that when it's not in the book. Hey coach, what do I do?
Right.
Oh, well, I understand the principles. So now I can do what you said earlier, which is adapt, which is principle number one,
Right.
right? Is the ability to adapt.
Right.
Nature is just beautiful at it. And there's a reason why it's able to do it. And when you understand that way, you can build those very same principles into your organization. And we show you how to do it. I mean, in real, like, go do this, right? And
Right.
in some of my
Right.
LinkedIn posts, I try to give a taste of what that looks like, these micro actions, these next steps, these follow up things that you can implement to just slowly but surely begin to mirror, to me, the most complex and brilliant system in the world, which is nature.
And I think that the micro actions is really where it's at, right? Micro actions do not get, in my opinion, the credit that they deserve, because
Yes.
it is those micro actions that sometimes create behavioral changes, or thought changes, whatever it is, right? But it is an accumulation of those micro actions that
Yes.
drive change, right?
Yes.
It's
Yes.
the carrot and the stick, right? Well, let's nibble off the carrot a little bit and
Mhm.
get down the path, or I'll take the stick and I'll just beat you into submission along the path, and we all know
Yes.
how that works. And I think that, you know in this, and I'd love to understand where your thinking is today and the way the world is going today, because as a technologist, um, AI is out there. I just came off an AI summit in New York City.
Mhm.
Java, our biggest summit, their 10th year, 7,200, 7,500 attendees, incredible.
Oh, good
Um,
turnout.
there last year, it was a little bit over 5,000. Um, huge, huge summit all around AI, and there was every discussion, right? And
Yeah.
so as technology and businesses try to move with swift velocity, right, as fast as they can, um, and keep up with their competitors and find a competitive advantage and what's their edge and all the buzzwords. How does your framework and this thinking
Mhm.
of leadership is like ecosystems. How do you see that growing, right? Because you will have gone through legacy through cloud, and now we're still moving to cloud, and in certain cases I'm thinking about my ERP customers who are having to upgrade, um but now you're layering AI on it, right?
Mhm.
And the big topic of the summit was, leaders coming in and the C-suite coming in and saying, we want it, let's get it, let's implement it. And it's
Yes.
like, rah, rah, yes, yes, yes. Nobody's asking, what is it?
Right.
What are
Yes.
the outcomes? What's your why? What are the outcomes? I walk into a room, I am a person full of questions. I have questions.
Yes.
I want to learn everything about everything, understand where everybody's at, what they're thinking. And what's happening is these polar opposite, I found, right? And just the more conversations I had, the more I found that this is an epidemic in this space that we're in right now, that nobody's asking the question, but why? What
Yes.
is the outcome you're looking to achieve? So how does your living systems leadership framework and thinking move along through and grow with these different organizations as they're trying to shift from waterfall to agile,
Hmm.
whatever the buzzwords are at the time, right? As
Yes.
they evolve, how does this framework evolve with them, right? So it's not something that's for right now, but it's something that can continue to live and breathe and flourish.
Okay. So we go back to nature on two counts. So again, we're looking for the common thread so that we have an understanding, right? And it just gives us a framework. We don't know anything. Just pretend I don't know any details about AI. I don't know what it can or cannot do. So I turn to nature. And
Mm,
the first thing I realize is that a stream cannot rise higher than its source. Okay. Now I see that in nature. So the one thing I know without knowing anything about AI yet, I know that. So wherever we are, we're the source, right? Our data, our thoughts, whatever we put into this, whatever AI is going to be, it's never going to rise higher than that. I don't care what they tell you because that goes against the laws that I see in the natural world. Now, it may take the really good things about us and the really bad things and make them bigger, make them
mm,
faster. And and in some cases that's fantastic, right? But we also have something called the law of polarity. And like I said, there's no one-sided coin. Okay,
right,
so when I hear you talking about heads all day and it's great and all these things it can do, nope, turn it over,
right,
right? And call out what at least potentially some of the trade-offs. It's not being negative.
right,
It's just saying they have to exist. Again, I know that because that is a law of nature. So there are just some fundamentals. When I walk into the AI room, I already have these things in my head because I know that AI was created within a system and that system has rules and that AI cannot, it's not exempt from those
right.
rules. So that's my one take on AI. The second one, nature. Um, and this one is, there's a guy, Mandelbrot, I think his name is. So he did this research about the fractal aspect of nature, right?
Mm,
And it's these patterns, right? And the big is the small. And I'll give you a brief example, which really does work, and it's fantastic. So if you look at a tree that hasn't been pruned, okay, and you look at the trunk and you look at the main branches, and then branches off from there, that pattern follows all the way to the end of even the thin branches. And
right.
that if I broke that thin branch off the end, I could look at it and hold it up next to the tree and it would match that. Right. So that's kind of what he was talking about. A lot of the CGI stuff we see in movies is because of his research, by the way, um,
Interesting.
back in the day. So, so that part of it, I know that nature has a fractal aspect to it. Now, here's what's interesting in a separation, maybe just my own observation. So this is not fact, okay? So I'm trying to build a software company. I told you about the framework, right? We're going to do all of the resource allocation stuff based upon ecosystem. So I start reading all of these books about startups and building software companies, right? Every single one of them said this. You must understand what problem you're solving,
Mm,
right? Who you're solving it for, right? And then what outcome you're delivering. I thought, wow, that's fantastic. But that can't just apply to a startup. That has to be, right, existing corporations.
correct.
I've never heard that conversation ever come up. In 40 years of working, I've never heard anybody talk about the problem that they solve, who they solve it for, only if you're in the startup world. And it doesn't, I'd always like there's this wall. So I'm going to go back to fractal. So to me, if that's the whole core of business is solving a problem, and however you do it, maybe you do it faster, right? Maybe you do it cheaper, right? Whatever your positioning is, right? Maybe better quality, whatever, who cares? Nobody does all three of them, but you pick one or two and that's your position. Okay. So now if I'm an employee, if I'm internal, I'm asking that same question of AI. Yes, let's get AI. What problem are we solving?
Right.
Right. Because again, I'm just using fractals and I'm saying, well, if at the big level, if at the trunk and the main branches, if it looks like this and we're really problem solvers, then everything we do should be about solving problems,
Right.
right? Whether that's for our customer, right? The bigger world, or it's internal. When you can name the problem that you're solving, then let's go solve it.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
that's that side of it. I don't really hear a lot of problem solving. And this is funny because what you described, a lot of my calls with IT leaders, especially. This is, I mean, it turns into a complaining session. I'll call it, where this is what they're facing. Right. So they go and sit in front of senior leadership and they're like, we need to get moving here on AI. What are we doing? And they're saying, well, what problem are we? What do you want to
Right.
do? They
Well,
just want to do something so they can report to somebody to say, oh, I'm doing something.
right.
Right. Well, we know there's nothing that exists in nature that doesn't have a function. Right. So we may not understand what that function is, but I promise you, it has a function. What's the function? Right.
Right.
So these are just things, approaches that when you have a living systems mindset, you just go and asking, like you said, you just go and asking these kinds of questions. And then
Right.
once I start getting those answers, then yeah, let's hit the gas. Let's go. But
Right.
let's understand what we're solving for here.
Right. You need to really understand your outcomes because the other
Mhm.
thing is that it can be very detrimental to the organization to just kind of go off,
Right.
right? Even, even something as simple as, whatever one of the GPTs, right? Whatever it is. Um, Think ERP systems. You take ERP systems, you have to modernize it. You put a pin in that modernization so that way you can invest some money into AI because it's the new thing.
Mhm.
And you think that when you put a pin in that and you come back to it, you can pick up where you left off. But now what you've done is, you have a finance team of people that are sitting there and they've been given some new AI, something that
Mhm.
maybe came along with your software or something, right? A
Yes.
copilot, whatever it is. Um, and they're pulling data out of the ERP and they're creating all kinds of reports and processes and things that they're using through this AI technology that they're using to enhance themselves as producers. And that's
Mhm.
phenomenal because that's what AI is. AI is less, to me, it's less of a technology, more of a tool to make us um, more productive in whatever it is that we're trying to do, right?
Yes.
It's a human tool, not so much a technical tool, I see it as. And so what you've done now is you've created all these ghost processes and ghost reports and things that sit outside of the system. Now you have to
Mhm.
go back and modernize the ERP. You can't do that because now you have all of these things you don't know exist. They're ghosts, right? Because they exist within the
Yes.
people, and those people may have left and passed it off to somebody else. And where's the prompt live? And how good is that prompt? And
Yep.
is the data hallucinating when it's coming out? And are we cross checking? And is it really saving time? All of those questions that nobody's really thinking about. And I spent days at the summit trying to encourage people to think about this, right? So it is about what are the outcomes we're looking to achieve and, displacing people in their
Mhm.
roles to me while it saves you money on your bottom line and then maybe gets the C-level or whoever some nice bonuses because the numbers came in pretty, um, doesn't actually contribute to the growth of the organization. It actually hurts it to some degree.
Right.
And unless the boards start to get smart to this and look at it through a lens of, we have these people in place for 3, 5, 7-year contracts. Where are they in their tenure of that contract? And what decisions are they making? Because guess what? It all looks great on paper right now, and I'm out of here in 3 years, and
Bingo.
it's not my problem,
Yep.
right? So I think that I understand the C-suite wanting to embrace technology, embrace this AI stuff, and try to get value out of it and get in on the ground floor, right? But it's important to understand the outcomes. But I also think that it's really important for boards to question the why.
Hmm.
Why are we doing this? And I do not think that, well, if we do this, we can cut, 50 out of the 100 help desk people we have, or whatever it is.
Hmm.
That's not a good enough reason. I do not
Right.
think, right? Because you have to look at the long-term implications of what doing that is.
Yes.
And theoretically, if you did that, you would also want to allow for another channel of revenue or some kind of business growth, which would then require you to bring those 50 people back in. It
Right.
may be a different capacity, right? So I think that the AI talk and the modernization of legacy equipment need to come together at the table,
Hmm.
and they need to work within the same because they are all part of the same ecosystem,
They
right?
are.
So
Yes.
that's where I'm getting at. There are all of these pieces that, I'm thinking of, if you build a dam, one side of it's dry and the other side of it's wet, but the dam starts to rupture, they need to be able to come back together.
Right.
Uh, right.
Yes. Well, what you're describing is systems thinking.
Yeah.
Okay. So to me, here's the greatest threat to systems thinking. One is that people act in their own self-interest.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, in and of itself, that's not a bad thing, right? But that's what we do. And then short-termism. When
Mhm.
you put those two things together, this is
Mm.
what we get.
Right.
And you called it and you said, yeah, but I won't be here. Right.
Right.
So we're going to hit our numbers for the duration of my tenure here. What I leave for the next person, who cares? Right.
Right.
But when I write my bio, it's going to say that we hit these numbers.
Right.
Right. And then we're going to say, well, hey, we did fine when I was here. So it must be the new person.
Right.
Right. And so this is us not understanding exactly what Robert Payne, the ecologist, was talking about. He called it a trophic cascade. It's when you, maybe you overhunt
Mm.
the primary predators and how that ends up having an impact all the way down here in the grasslands. Right?
Right.
So there's a great story I love to tell about Yellowstone.
Yes.
So, they hunted the wolves almost to extinction or what have you, the gray wolves there. And, well, that had an impact. Okay. And so eventually they bring the wolves back. Well, they bring the wolves back and the path of the river changed. It shifted miles down the river. Well, why would bringing wolves back have anything to do with changing the course of a river
Mm.
miles away? And it goes something like this. When the wolves came back, they started hunting the deer. The deer had been, because there were no predators, the deer had been eating along the river, the grass and off the trees and the bushes. It destabilized the river banks.
Mm.
Okay? So the river changed flow when the wolves were gone. When the wolves come back, they start hunting. The deer changed their eating patterns. The grass had a chance to grow back. The trees grew back. When they did so, they stabilized the riverbanks, shifted the flow of the river miles away. So sometimes the things that we do here today aren't felt till much later and miles away,
Right.
right? And we never make the connection back. And this is what having a system thing. It's not that you can always anticipate, but you know what? I walk into the room looking for it,
Right.
asking that question, right? I start to map out the relationships within my organization, right? We don't want silos, right? We want to look at where everyone connects. We call them seams, right?
Mm,
If you read what was it, the book of the five rings, Musashi calls it the corners. You aim at the corners because that's where the weak point is, where things connect, where
right.
things overlap. That's where we're going to lose it. That's where energy will drain from that organization. So one of the places I start is there.
Right. No, I think that's awesome. And I love having this conversation. I would love to have you back when you finish your book.
Yes.
And I'm
It's
hoping
literally only weeks away though. I'm in the final edits,
I
just waiting
love
for it to
that.
go there.
I love that. I would love to have an early 2026
That
discussion.
would be
I
awesome.
hope that we can celebrate your book launch and celebrate this thinking, and hopefully in a new year influence some leaders to embrace this kind of thinking, right? And
Yes,
I think that it takes a lot of us to be able to get the message out,
I agree.
and
Yes.
to talk about these things. But I find it fascinating, and I love that I met you and that we had this these conversations over the last few weeks, because it it is in line with how I thought, but I never actually would have tied it to living systems. So
Yeah. Well, neither would I, except
thank
by serendipity. So
Thank you. Thank you very much.
yes,
So I would like to thank you for joining us, and wish you a very happy new year, and
yeah,
look forward to having you back early next year to talk about your book, and hopefully continue to spread the word, and maybe do a little bit of discussion around what some examples are of conversations you've been having in some of the
oh
trainings that
yes,
you're conducting, right? I'd really like to have a session where we get into the meat of what does it look like, right?
yes,
To get
yes,
people to understand. So you and I can connect on that separately. That would be fantastic. I think we could tie that together, because I would like to continue this conversation, and this evolution around living systems, especially as we enter the age of AI, and what all.
absolutely.
I think it's important. And I love the fact that I think it'll give us a nice grounding, no pun
Yeah,
intended, for
I
it.
love it. It's great.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Nate. It was
It's
fantastic having you with me, and
great to be here.
just such an exciting conversation. And I'm looking forward to your book and learning more about the living systems leadership framework. Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Thank you.
That is it for today, everyone. Thank you for joining us on the Give Back Lab. Until next time, I'm Daniella. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us today in the Give Back Lab. If today's conversation moved you, challenged you, or made you just feel seen, share it forward. That's how change begins. Until next time, keep showing up, keep speaking truth, and giving back in your own way. The lab is always open.